What is going on, Internet? Lou here. We meet again. As you can tell from what's going on my desktop, today we're going to be taking a look at Ubuntu 11.10. We're going to be rolling up our sleeves and really getting into this review. In fact, I'm not even wearing sleeves. That's how crazy this review is going to be, sleeveless. So anyway, let's get to it. As I described in my video before, when I was kind of giving you guys a brief overview of the kind of content I think I want to produce, this isn't going to be your standard distribution review. I'm not going to be going through one application at a time of what's installed and so on and so on. What I'm going to be covering is the things that really jump out at me, the things that have made an impression on me that have caused me to want to have a discussion about them. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at with this Ubuntu 11.10 review. So let me start off by saying that probably I would say 80 or 90% of most Linux users started out on Ubuntu or an Ubuntu derivative distribution. And so based on that simple truth, we have to really thank Ubuntu for their contributions to the community and really easing people into Linux. So for that, I want to say thank you to Ubuntu and to the Ubuntu project, because I started out, actually I take that back, I started out using Fedora, but shortly after that, I moved on to Ubuntu. So, I want to say thank you to Ubuntu for all their contributions, because, whether you like what Ubuntu is doing or not, you can't get around the fact that they have made some significant contributions to desktop Linux. And so, I'd like to extend my gratitude for that. Some of the things, let's start off by some of the things I really like about Ubuntu. First of all, I love their repositories. I think they have a ton of really great high-quality software. If a commercial company would like to produce software for Linux, most of the time you're going to find that the platform they develop for is going to be for Ubuntu. And so you have probably your best chance of getting your hands on a certain type of really limited software is going to probably be on Ubuntu. So I really like the repositories. They have some solid repos, and most of the most popular Linux software, I believe, is made available for Ubuntu most of the time first. So I really like that about Ubuntu. I really like the software. So the repos are fantastic. I like apt, the command line interface package management system that Ubuntu uses. I really like the features that apt has, and I like using it. It's simple, straightforward, to the point. It's fairly intuitive. It's pretty easy to use, and it's flexible. You can do a lot with apt. I like apt. I like the fact that Ubuntu and Canonical have taken their project and they've said, you know what, we're not going to put out the same GNOME 2. whatever desktop that all these other distributions are doing. Now, even though for a while the Ubuntu project, really kind of tweaked the GNOME 2 desktop, little things here or there with the Me menu and certain things like that, integrating Ubuntu 1, they really said, you know what, we want to really make a loud statement. And that's what they've done with Unity. They've made a very loud statement. They finally came out and said, we want to stand on our own. And I respect them for that. A lot of people don't really like where they've gone with this, but you've got to understand, I think Unity is really in its infancy right now and has a long way to go before it matures into a really, what I would consider, productive desktop. For me, right now, it's not where it needs to be. And we're going to get into some of the things, again, that I like about it and some of the things that I wish were a little bit different, but it is still in its infancy. Now, I've been keeping track of Ubuntu 12.04, and although there's not going to be any really revolutionary changes in the next version of Unity, they're working a lot on polish and stability. They are looking to implement, some kind of key features and changes. Again, these are mock-ups, so I'm not really going to go through a lot of these because the likelihood of all these things really being there in 12.04 is very slim. But I like some of what I'm seeing, and I'm encouraged by it. However, I think that I may not really come back to seriously visit Ubuntu until maybe 12.10. So it's going to be a while, another year most likely, before I really seriously consider using Ubuntu again. But again, there's good things about it. And so it's okay to have an opposing point of view. But I think what's really needs to happen when it comes to Linux, those of us who really love Linux, who really are passionate about it, enthusiastic about it, we really need to be constructive. And it's okay, again, to have an opposing opinion, but we should really keep the greater good of Linux in mind. And really, if you're going to have a constructive criticism, I think you should offer up a suggestion on how to make that better. Will Canonical watch this video? Mark Shuttleworth watch this video? You never know. And the reason why I say that is the other day I put out my own brief little Linux Mint 12 review. And the next morning, now I had posted a link to this in the Linux Mint forums. And sure enough, the next morning I woke up and I had an email from Clem, the founder and main lead developer of Linux Mint, which, by the way, is one of the most widely used computer operating systems in the world, personally emailed me. Now, does that mean I'm someone special? Absolutely not. However, what does that mean? What it means is that, and he commented on a lot of the points I put in that video and actually thanked me for it. So what does that mean? Well, everyone has a voice. Even someone with a small little channel like mine has a voice. And if you really kind of put your thoughts out there constructively with the intention on trying to make something better, you never know what kind of an impact that can make. And he actually kind of gave me a little bit of a glimpse on the direction Linux Mint is going and what to expect. I thought that was awesome. And you guys know how, if you've watched my Linux Mint video, you know how I feel about Linux Mint. So to me, it was such a cool experience to get an email from Clem. So, you know, that's definitely an email I'm going to be saving and kind of geeking out over for a long time. But again, you can have an opposing opinion to, you know, maybe the popular opinion out there. Just try to be constructive with it, again, because I think that the common foundational truth is, regardless of what distribution you find yourself on, we all love Linux. So let's try to make Linux, you know, the best desktop experience we can by offering up solutions when we have opposing opinions. So I just brought 11.10 up to date after a fresh install here in a virtual machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reboot this so the updates can take effect. And then again, we're going to be going over a brief look at what I like and some of the things I maybe don't care for as much about Unity and my thoughts on how it could probably be improved. So again, I like Ubuntu's repositories. I like the fact that if people develop software for Linux, most of the time they're probably going to develop it for Ubuntu first, or it may even be the primary distribution or only distribution they develop for. I like the fact that Canonical and Ubuntu has done an amazing job with hardware OEMs. Who'd ever think that 5-10 years ago that you would be able to order Ubuntu on a Dell, or you've got companies like System 76 that only ship their hardware with Dell. Even Asus, you can get Ubuntu pre-installed on some of their hardware. You've really got to give props to Canonical and Ubuntu from doing some amazing work with partnering with these OEMs and trying to bring Linux to mainstream hardware and mainstream OEMs. So they've done a fantastic job with that. So my hat's off again to Canonical and the Ubuntu project. So okay, here we go. We've got our Ubuntu 11.10 desktop completely up to date, and in a virtual machine we've got 3D acceleration enabled. We've got our familiar Ubuntu login sound. And here we go. So, you know what? I think we are in the 2D environment. Let's log out, and I was just in the 3D environment when I was bringing everything up to date. Let's see what's going on with that. So yeah, I really and you know, the community support. A lot of people use Ubuntu, so there's a lot of users and a lot of support. So when you may run into an issue, you're going to have a lot of people that are available to give you a hand, and you can't overlook that either. So there's a large Ubuntu community. I noticed when I switched over to using Fedora, especially, you know, there on the Fedora forums, there's a decent amount of people, I guess, but it pales in comparison to the Ubuntu forums. It really does. And, you know, there probably isn't as many people posting on the Fedora forums because they are experienced Linux users, and a lot of these individuals can probably figure things out on their own, so they're not posting on forums. So you've got to kind of take that into consideration. However, having that large community support is a benefit, especially to newer Linux users, to have those resources available to be able to turn to. So that's another good benefit of Ubuntu. All right, so even if this is 2D, we're just going to roll with it. So anyway, Ubuntu also has created their own platform. With Unity, you've got a lot of people developing certain lenses, and by lenses I mean this would be considered like a lens. Okay, the only lens I think I've actually used there's a Gwibber lens that came out when 1104 was just released. I played around with that. I think the idea behind it's pretty cool. But personally for me, I don't know. I think that this dash here can be a little bit slow. Also, media, internet apps, more apps, find files. This needs to go, personally. A lot of clicking here. They've obviously made these icons nice and big with the mindset that you're probably going to be running this on some sort of touch device. Now, let's get this out of the way. Gnome-Shell and Ubuntu. And Unity. A lot of individuals are upset because they feel like it's not created for the desktop, but it's created for tablets. Again, this is just my opinion. It's not the only one. However, Gnome-Shell, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I feel like it could be used beautifully on a touch device or a tablet, but I don't get the feeling that it's really only designed for that. Whereas with Unity, I get the exact opposite impression. I really get the fact that tablets and touch devices are what Ubuntu is catering to here with Unity. Now, if you follow a lot of Ubuntu news, you're going to see that Mark Shuttleworth wants to get Unity and Ubuntu on phones. Okay, and most phones today are touchscreen devices, and so you can really see how they're catering to touch devices here with all these really big icons. I mean, look how big these icons are. They're obnoxiously big. There's no need for them to be that large, and I think they do it obviously to cater to tablet devices. This again, I know that the aesthetic shouldn't really matter that much. But I just think this is ugly. It really is ugly. I mean, the purple and brown, they need to do something with it. I know they updated ambience a little bit, the Ubuntu theme, and they updated it to GTK3. And, I do think it looks better than it did before, but it's ugly. These brown menus, they need to really do something with that because I think it looks terrible. Their icons, I mean, if the Ubuntu project really paid attention to their users, they're going to find that very few people run the stock standard Ubuntu experience. They're going to change these with the Fienza icons, or they're going to change this to some type of the window theme to some type of elementary theme. You just pay attention to the community. Most people don't like this, and it's one of the first things people change is the icons and the theme. Again, we spend a lot of time on our computers staring at these screens. It has to be a pleasurable experience. Now, if you do your research and a lot of reading, you're going to find that Mark Shuttleworth definitely has Apple envy. I think that he really likes Mac OS X, and in fact, you can see its influence here in Unity. That's one of my biggest, dissatisfactions with Unity. I feel like they tried to take a Mac OS X idea and implement it here. However, they didn't take the Apple approach. And what do I mean by Apple approach? Well, Apple doesn't, in my opinion, Apple, what they do well, it's not necessarily innovating with something new, but they'll take a good idea and they'll do it better than the people that came up with the idea to begin with. And they'll build on that idea and innovate on top of that idea. Apple does that really well. I feel like what we have here in Unity is a lot of second-rate Apple ideas that aren't even as good as what Apple's doing. If you're going to take an idea, you've got to do it as good or better. I feel like it just comes out as a second-rate experience. For instance, when you open up something like Nautilus here, you've got this global menu. Not a fan. And it's weird because when I used Mac OS 10, for those of you who don't know, as a Mac user previous to Linux, I didn't mind the global menu whatsoever. It felt natural, it felt intuitive, it felt normal to use. However, one of the things that I really don't like with Unity is their implementation of the global menu. I don't like that whatsoever. It doesn't work in all the applications, and in some of the applications it just doesn't work well. So they need to get rid of this global menu, or they need to get it working right. That's the first thing. So, I don't like that global menu. Again, I think they borrowed their dock idea here from macOS again. I loved the dock. In fact, it was one of the things I liked most about using macOS 10 on the desktop was the actual dock. Now, at least the macOS gave you options. There weren't a lot of options, but I think they were the most basic necessary options to make the dock functional and make it a good user experience. The fact that they only let you keep it here on the left is stupid. You should be able to configure this more. Be able to put it on left, right, or bottom of the screen. That's what I think would make most sense. Let users customize it. Now, to be fair, Ubuntu and Canonical said they didn't want to do this because they wanted to just get it working right. Instead of offering too many options that may not work well, they wanted to kind of just develop it and have it working before they introduced it. Well, I will agree with that. However, know your user base. I think they maybe, if they were to make a drastic change like this, I think they maybe should have rolled it out to a large group of beta testers and gotten feedback and then implemented it that way, because again, they wouldn't have had such a huge backlash when they developed and they released Unity to their existing users because they wanted more customization. Now you can install Compass Config Setting Manager and tweak certain things, but again, in my opinion, there should be more out-of-the-box configuration for the panel over here. So there's that. When you open up an application like Firefox, you'll see that the Unity dock over here hides. I like that. I like the fact that it gets out of the way, and you've got a full screen view of your application. The other thing that they've done, and again, a lot of users did not like this, if you notice up here in the upper left-hand corner, when you move the mouse cursor away, your minimize, maximize, and close buttons disappear. Okay? What they're trying to accomplish with these full-screen applications, hiding these buttons, they're trying to make these desktop environments, and Gnome-Shell's trying to do the same thing, make it more focused on application focused, and that's why they turn off being able to put a bunch of cluttery things on your desktop. They try to move everything out of the way and focus on your applications and your work. I think Gnome-Shell does it really well. I think Unity, not so much. If you come over here to the dock and you can go to your workspace switcher here, okay, which is okay. I mean, this was available and doesn't seem to want to work right now in Compass for a while. And but I just don't think that it's as intuitive as the Gnome-Shell implementation. So not a huge fan. Again, it just feels weird the way they've implemented this global menu. What they did do over here with what you would consider kind of like the me menu, it's not too bad. They've included some chat options. They've integrated Ubuntu 1, which was there for a while. They've put some features in here, like some commonly used features, your system settings, your display, your startup applications, your software updater, locking the screen, logging out, suspending, hibernate, shutdown. Those all make sense. I think that it was a smart decision to put those there. I like how they did that. The other thing that's kind of weird to me, this dash just seems, and of course it seems snappy now that I'm working with it, but it just seems slow at times, really, really sluggish. Not just in a virtual machine. I've had this installed on my hardware too. They need to speed that up. And the other thing that's weird to me is there's a lot of clicking involved. like with Gnome-Shell, I find it interesting that I'm going to be, referring a lot to Gnome-Shell and compare and contrasting, because those are the two big upsets in the Linux community right now, and they're the two that get talked about the most. So, I'm going to be making references to Gnome-Shell quite a bit, but I find it interesting that a lot of people who used to use like the GNOME-Do application, for instance, they're used to hitting a one of their keyboard keys and then starting to type their application and hitting enter to launch it. They were using GNOME-Do, yet they have all these really terrible things to say about Gnome-Shell, and for the most part, it's your basic application launching is the same. It's not as intelligent, I think, as GNOME-Do. It doesn't have as many features, but the basic premise is still the same, and yet you've got all these GNOME-Do users saying that they hate Gnome-Shell. It makes no sense to me, but with Unity, you can kind of do the same thing. You can hit your super key, you can start typing something like terminal, and it comes up. But if you were to try to navigate with your mouse, you're going to have to come down here at the bottom, select, go to your applications. Here's another click. Come down, search for your applications, click again. There's a lot of clicks. Okay, so it takes more steps to access what you need, which means it's less functional. You can make the same argument for Gnome-Shell. I just think they have a better implementation of it. And for me, I prefer navigating through Gnome-Shell as opposed to the GNOME-2 way of doing things. So it just feels like there's a lot of clicking that needs to be done just to navigate around the base system of Ubuntu. Now, what's coming in GNOME 3.4 is jump lists, okay? And that's going to speed up the way that you launch certain tasks or applications within Gnome-Shell. Hopefully they implement something very similar with to a jump list, meaning you'd be able to right-click on an application or on a process, and you're going to have a lot more features, things that you're able to do with it. So I hope they really implement that here in Ubuntu into Unity, because I think it'll add a lot more functionality. So again, the dash feels a little bit slow at times and sluggish. There's a lot of clicking that you have to do. Also, this whole home panel right here, in my opinion, what would greatly improve this is to be able to customize it. Control what's displayed here. If you were able to control what was displayed here on just this home panel, I think that would actually solve a lot of your problems. If you were able to display multiple things here and had a lot of different customizations, you could get quick access to a whole host of things. Just by hitting your super key, you could have, really, really quick access to, say, your most commonly used applications. You could, instead of having 2, 4, 6, 8 of these things here listed, I could put 8 of my most commonly used applications, or whatever I want. Just make the customization available for this home screen. I can guarantee you, almost no one uses anything on this home screen. They're not going to use the browser because they're probably going to have it over here in their dash or in their panel. And same thing with their music application or their photo viewer. It's probably most likely over here in the panel. So let us decide what we want right here and get more functionality out of it, because this is all wasted, in my opinion. So that's a grep I've got there. If you go to the Software Center, here's an area that I think they did something really great. I think that the work they've put in the Software Center is very, very nice. It looks extremely polished. It looks really slick. It reminds me of something that, when I see it, it says that, hey, we really thought about what we were going to do with this. We put a lot of time into developing this Software Center, and we really polished it. They've added this nice rating system here. They've got these nice big graphics, and it's aesthetically pleasing. There's not too much going on. I think they've got the nice categories here down the side. You can flip through different, popular applications up here at the top that are being, showcased at that point in time. It's really, really nice. You can do filters provided by Ubuntu, canonical partners, applications for purchase. You can view a history. It's nice. You can access your software repositories using the application center, which you were able to do before. But here's all your repos. You can add some PPAs or change your repos. So I like that. It's nice. I really wish they would have kept in Synaptic. If I install software, I'm generally going to do it in the command line, or if I don't know the name of the package, I'm going to look it up in Synaptic. You can make the argument that you can install it easy enough from the repos, and so and I'll agree with you. If I like Synaptic, I can just install it very easily, but I prefer Synaptic over the Software Center. But if you're looking for something mainstream for the general public, I think they did a very good job on the Software Center, so I'm not going to knock them for that. I like the idea, again, behind these lenses. I think there's a lot of potential. I think they've created a platform for developers to be able to utilize these lenses in their applications, and I think that's a really amazing thing. I don't see a lot of that being done at the moment, and again, I think that's due to Unity being in its infancy. So, and then look at some of these common things, right? See this top bar up here? Just look at this, where this Ubuntu icon meets this top bar. It just looks sloppy. It looks terrible. That looks awful. Before, when you had the dock right here, the dash, or the panel, whatever you want to call it, the Ubuntu icon went all the way up to the top. Okay, it looked like it was supposed to be there. This just looks like someone made a mistake, and they released it on accident this way, because this looks terrible. Clean that up. It just looks awful. And again, update your icons. The icons are terrible. There's some really nice icons available. You can bring them up to speed a little bit more. I like the basic layout they have here of Nautilus. That's pretty nice. I think they did a decent job. When you scroll through this, you can see it has that little. See how that has that little bounce effect? It's very Android-like with that bounce effect at the bottom. Again, with the idea that this is going to be on some type of tablet or touch device. You definitely get that impression when using Ubuntu 11.10. I don't feel that Gnome-Shell is this aggressively going after touch or tablet as much as Ubuntu, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. People are all up in arms saying, I don't have a tablet, I have a desktop, I have a mouse. Great. In my opinion, though, I'd like to have a tablet at one point. I'm thinking about picking one up. It would be amazing to be able to run Gnome and Gnome-Shell both on my desktop and on my tablet. Have it feel intuitive on the desktop and intuitive on a tablet. In fact, I think that it's really hard, maybe, for both projects to come up with something that feels like it was made for that particular piece of hardware without all in the same version. I think it wouldn't be a bad thing for GNOME or even Ubuntu to develop certain versions of their shell for touch devices and certain versions for the desktop. I mean, that's what Unity was birthed out of anyway. It was birthed out of the Unity interface was made originally for touch and tablet devices, and they've brought it into the desktop. So you can see just by little things, like even the scroll bars on the side, when you open up a window. Actually, Nautilus isn't probably a very good example of that. Terminal is, though. Open up Terminal, and as you can tell, well, let's do this. Okay, right here on the side, these little grab handles. Now, if they had the old scroll bars over here, they're very thin. If you're on a touch device, it would be very hard to scroll up and down with those. I think that's why they switched to these. In fact, I think these were inspired by mobile devices. Once again, not a fan. When I had installed Ubuntu 11.04, even initially 11.10, one of the first things I do is I remove these scroll bars. Can't stand them. But again, mobile device inspired. You really get that impression with Unity. Not so much, in my personal opinion, with Gnome-Shell. I think Gnome-Shell feels like it's home on the desktop. versus Unity really gives you the impression that it feels like it should be on a tablet or on a touch device. So again, I think that this panel needs a lot of work. I think that the overall theme, they need to bring current. I love the fact that GNOME 3 feels like an operating system that we should be using today. It feels modern. It feels and looks elegant. GNOME still, to me, Unity and Ubuntu still feels like old brown and purple Ubuntu. Make it something that feels like it's modern. Make it something that it feels like I should be using it today. These icons are very, I don't know, cartoonish to me. They're not elegant whatsoever. I think they really need to hire a graphic artist as soon as possible and get them working on all this stuff, because it looks terrible. And if you're really modeling a lot of what you do after Mac OS X, you've got a long way to go in terms of aesthetics. So I really hope that they kick it up a notch in Ubuntu 12.04. Some of the mock-ups, again, I've seen look a lot better than this, and some of the mock-ups look like a desktop I could actually use during the day and stand to look at. This, not so much. So I think, again, that they're sticking, obviously, with their Debian base. They're sticking with apt. Apt is very good. They've got a lot of really good software repositories. I think they're doing a great job partnering with hardware manufacturers and OEMs to bring Linux to anyone and everyone. So my hat's off to them for taking a stand and saying we want to do something unique. We don't want to keep producing the same GNOME kind of desktop that all these other distributions are doing. We want to develop our own platform. And I think that's amazing. I think it was brave. I think it was bold. And I still think it's in its infancy. Even though this is the second iteration that we've seen of Unity, I think it has a long way to go. I'm going to check it out in 12.04, but I have a feeling that 12.10 may be Ubuntu's best shot for me as far as getting me to use it as a desktop. And we'll see. I think, again, it has a lot of work to do. This dash and panel feels clumsy. The global menu doesn't feel like it's implemented properly, and it doesn't feel like it's fluid throughout the entire OS with all these different applications. I think that they've got a long way to go here, making this feel like a desktop that is modern and current, something that we would use today. It's aesthetically pleasing. I think they really need to kick it up a notch there. But, again, I think they've done a lot of really good things. But, these are some of my biggest criticisms here about Unity. And it, again, well, for instance, if I'm working with all these different applications here in Gnome-Shell, look at all this stuff I have open. Very quickly, I drag my mouse cursor up to the left-hand corner of the screen. It gives me this nice overview of all my running applications, and I can very quickly change what desktop that I want these things to be displayed on. And, I can do it. It feels intuitive. It feels like it's supposed to work that way, and it's really, really nice. And very quickly, I can, change my workflow and have things really, productive going on. And I feel like I'm not, fighting with the operating system. That's what I feel like when I'm using Unity. I feel like it's a battle. I feel like things aren't intuitive. I'm constantly struggling to get things done the way that I feel like it most naturally should work. So again, my next criticism was to really try to make Unity feel more intuitive. And I don't think that that's going to happen if they continue to push this mobile platform. If this is the direction they want to go with tablet and with mobile platform, personal opinion, because they're not doing a very good job right now making a desktop that feels like it could be run on both. This needs to go back to a tablet operating system, and they need to start developing something that feels more intuitive for the desktop, because the more and more they start developing on Unity and pushing this project, the more it feels like it's just leaving the desktop behind and really just going to a tablet OS. So that's just my opinion. I do not think Gnome-Shell is doing that, however. It feels very nice to use on the desktop, and it feels way more intuitive, and I'm much more productive in my with day-to-day tasks inside of Gnome-Shell. However, Unity, not so much. But again, I just want to thank Ubuntu for helping new Linux users really step into the Linux world. Thank you for all the years that I used Ubuntu or Ubuntu derivative. I think you've done a lot of great good for the Linux community. I'm looking forward to the changes and new iterations of Unity, and hopefully I'm crossing my fingers because there's a lot about the Ubuntu platform I do like. I'm hoping that more so in the future it feels comfortable to use it on the desktop. But guys, that's my 2 cents. Again, Captain Rabbit Trails. But I really wanted to get all of my kind of initial thoughts and opinions out there. I know this is not like the normal review you're probably going to see on YouTube as far as a distro is concerned, but that's good because I think that hopefully I'm doing things a little bit differently. Hope you guys are enjoying them, and until next time, we'll see you later.